Hello, my name is Valerie, and this channel is Unsavory History, where we talk about the parts of history that were sanitized, rewritten, or softened to make them more palatable. We're going to cover topics like how Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land was a lot less patriotic than we were taught, how the American eugenics movement helped inspire Nazi Germany, and how even Hitler reportedly viewed one American Jim Crow rule as extreme. Now, speaking of Jim Crow, you've probably seen the recent debates around voting laws and redistricting maps. In several states, critics argue that new district maps weaken black voting power by redrawing majority black districts in ways civil rights groups say resemble tactics used during the Jim Crow era. But sadly, none of this is new. So here's today's unsavory history lesson. For decades, many Southern evangelicals openly fought against desegregation because they genuinely believed racial separation was supported by Christianity itself. I've been reading this book called The Bible Told Them So by J. Russell Hawkins, and it documents how Southern white evangelicals used theology to defend segregation during the civil rights movement. And some of the things people said publicly at the time used to be hard to believe. On June 17th, 1963, President John F. Kennedy invited nearly 250 religious leaders to the White House to discuss the need for civil rights legislation. Kennedy framed civil rights as a moral issue and asked clergy members to help support the movement. A lot of Northern ministers agreed with him. One clergyman from Washington, D.C. stated, "This is a moral problem. It may have economic, legal, and social overtones, but we, as religious men, must consider it solely the essential thing that it is, a moral problem." But one Baptist minister from Florida, Albert Garner, saw things quite differently. According to Hawkins' research, Garner argued that many Southern white Christians believed racial integration violated the will of God. He literally stated, "Segregation is a principle of the Old Testament," and then added, "Prior to this century, neither Christianity nor any denomination of it ever accepted the integration philosophy." Well, 2 days later, Kennedy submitted his civil rights bill to Congress, and almost immediately, resistance started building. In Hanahan, South Carolina, members of a Southern Baptist church gathered after Bible study to discuss the legislation. And instead of supporting civil rights, the church voted to oppose it. According to Hawkins, many white Southern Christians saw absolutely no contradiction between their faith and their opposition to racial equality. Some believed Kennedy himself was abandoning Christianity by supporting integration. One Southerner reportedly asked, "Where does Mr. Kennedy get his views and rules? Certainly not from the Holy Bible of God and Jesus Christ." And pressure for civil rights kept growing. The rhetoric started changing too. Southern churches began adopting language that probably still sounds familiar today, and you may have used it. The rhetoric of colorblindness. Phrases like, "I don't see race" or "I don't see color" became incredibly powerful talking points. On the surface, it sounded neutral, but in reality, it shifted attention away from segregation itself and away from the systems actively harming Black Americans. And this is the part of history that often gets cleaned up in modern retellings. People today tend to remember the civil rights movement as if everybody eventually realized segregation was wrong and got on board. But that really isn't what happened. Some of the strongest resistance came from respected churches, pastors, and religious institutions that believed they were defending Christianity. And these beliefs didn't just stay inside churches. They influenced schools, they influenced voting, they influenced housing policies. They influenced who could live where, worship where, and even who was considered fully equal under the law. That's what makes this history important. because systems don't just appear out of nowhere. Ideas become sermons, sermons become movements, and movements become laws. And if we only remember racism as individual hatred, we miss how deeply it was woven into American institutions, including American Christianity. And honestly, that's exactly why this channel exists. I'll be doing a much deeper dive into this book over on YouTube in the next few weeks, because this is really only scratching the surface of this book. The Bible Told Them So documents how many segregationist pastors argued that racial separation was parts of God's natural order. Some defended segregation using Old Testament passages, while others claimed that civil rights movement itself was anti-Christian and influenced by communism. The book also discusses how white Christian schools and academies were created specifically to avoid integration after Brown versus the Board of Education, and how some churches portrayed federal civil rights laws as attack on religious freedom. This history is uncomfortable, but uncomfortable history is often the history people worked the hardest to rewrite, sanitize, or bury for future generations. Because history is never just about the past. It shapes what people believe now. And if we want to understand the world we live in, we have to be willing to look honestly at the parts people tried to hide. This has been Unsavory History, and there's always more beneath the surface.